Antiguos is feeling guilty about hogging my comments, but I'm in need of some new material. So, but this is a really fun question for me. Or a couple points. He asked Antiguous asked, would I elaborate um, as to what the visual impression is apart from the visual science? To my understanding, an impression would be a moment in time as a photo presents. It's beyond style. I totally agree. When in a long pose, as a model moves, you can use knowledge because every 5 minutes it'll change, as does sunlight. Okay, so he was talking about using anatomy and maybe helping yourself with a pose that changes and that sort of thing and doing things to help yourself. But I don't think that's really the best part of this question. And I don't know, and I still don't agree that that's a good thing to do or a solution to the problem that he's brought up. But yeah, so what's the difference between the visual impression and visual science, right? That is to say, what an impressionist is doing apart from using the visual science. And that's really pretty wonderful stuff because, and by the way, it all saves you from all the other stuff, the changing of the day and that sort of thing. Every 5 minutes it'll change. Well, there's a piece of time, a slice of time that isn't going to change much. And if you talk about the models change, but their essential pose doesn't change. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to paint a portrait. You wouldn't have the ability to paint a portrait if the model's slightest move, if you couldn't get it back, let's put it that way. Uh, People think that they're painting a generic head because the model moves. That's a mistake. You actually don't have, it's not that hard to memorize the pose and put the head back. And, but what does stay the same? I think this is the question of questions, right? What stays the same? So when you first look at the model, remember, well, when you first look at the model, you're there to see what there is to see. You're trying to get your head around the beauty, right? You're trying to say, whoa, what is that? Wow, wow. And so after a bit, you sit there and meditate, right? You're listening, and eventually you're rather getting your head around that. And if you don't, you really ought not go forward. But you get your head around that. And that thing is what you're maintaining throughout the entire thing. Not the carefulness of every little shape, even though you should be good at that, at getting the model back, for example. You certainly shouldn't paint in different lights and different colors and all that sort of thing. All you do is confuse the heck out of yourself, and you take the essential unity of the visual impression away. But the big unifier really is, and the thing that separates just the science, of this to this and that to that, and color, chroma, hue, and all that sort of stuff. What separates that science from, you might say, the art of the impressionist is your sense of beauty, your sense that which you're responding to. Now, remember, I'm going to give you that Degas quote. He said, you mentioned Degas, I think, in the next one, but Degas said, "It's not your job isn't to copy what you see. It's to put down what you see as much as it's to make people see what you saw." Oh, I said that very badly. Maybe it'll come back to me in a second. But your job is to make them to give them ownership of that reason you even painted it. So you have to maintain that, to see it, get a really nice concept of it, and then don't let go of it, right? It's rather a little bit like the gesture of the figure when you're drawing a moving figure. At least if it's your own model, you can get the pose back. But you have to have pre-owned the gesture of the figure, that complex thing that it's doing, to the point where you say, yeah, I'll recognize that when I see it. That's why you even notice that it's moved out of the pose, because you have a concept of it. A lot of people won't do that. So the second part of the question, the second thing he was talking about was Sargent understood anatomy without, I don't think one can ever get to that level of, without which I don't think one can ever get to that level of mastery where he indeed elongates and beautifies his sitters. You can have the color, but it will not look right. He painted not what he saw. A painter never does, as Degas said of the masters. He painted not what he saw, but what he wanted you to see. Well, that's a pretty tricky point. But in fact, of course, like a guy like Ang is saying, no, I'm painting exactly what I see. Well, he's trying to show you what he found. He's not making stuff up in his artsy little head. Human heads aren't that interesting. Human heads, what's in our little heads, or nor is there as interesting as the grandeur of nature, the staggering sort of richness of the field we're looking at. And once we grasp that beauty, and it wouldn't matter if it was form play, wouldn't matter whether it was light or color play or any of those things, or if it was some combination of them, you have to get hold of it. You have to maintain the unity. You have to maintain that, shall we say, that original idea. And that's what you're trying to get across. That's what's not going anywhere. Even if the day changes, it's not going anywhere. On the other hand, if it changes much, you need to drop it and come back tomorrow, do it again, and have it again. But that's what keeps your head around the whole thing. I would argue, by the way, that I think Sargent would argue that he sometimes made his heads too small because he was trying to avoid making them too big. And I don't get the sense that he was trying to turn these guys into gods. I mean, I think he just didn't mind so much when that happened. I mean, most sitters probably don't mind so much, unless they're humble guys, being turned into something like gods. So let's go past that. There's one more point. This isn't going to be a long one today. And Solomon repeated Reynolds' words: "We can only paint what we know. When I say I don't think," and he's talking about when he's drawing, when I say I don't think, in other words, you have to be out of your mind to be a draftsman or whatever, is meant just like a pianist does. Does he think when he plays? Perhaps when he's composing, preparing to play, well, of course, there's all that thinking that goes into making yourself better, making that piece of music work better and that sort of thing. But then is that music, as he plays, he enjoys maybe when studying and training, but I always try to get to that state of the naive eye when back as an amateur, I was not aware of that which one has to learn, but just the feeling of trying to represent the truth in front of me. Well, that's a pretty fair thing, except not just the truth in front of you, but it's the beauty of what you see. And so a pianist is feeling those sounds, as a painter just feels the color. He isn't thinking. Now, if he's right, if it's he doesn't think if it's right. If he did not follow music theory, plays with his guts, inner feeling, as one must draw. So everything you've said is what I've been saying, right? It's not just feeling, though. You have to have a conscious awareness of what it is you're trying to get the other guy to see. And which means you have to have a compelling beauty, and you have to know when you've achieved it, okay? And that's how you can get out of impressionist work so nicely. It's not a question of dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's and putting on the eyelashes. It's got nothing to do with any of that stuff. Those beauties that made you even stand there in the first place have nothing to do with those. That's just method eating you up, don't you think? So, if you stood there and looked at somebody and all you saw was wonderful, beautiful pores everywhere, and little warts and moles and all these sorts of things, well, good, heaven help you, but I probably wouldn't be much interested in looking at your work. But it isn't what compels you. When you set something up, the beauty is always bigger than that. It's much bigger than that. And it's always in our category. It's always in the categories of form, not of finish, okay, of color play, not of a particular note, and all that sort of thing, right? So one of the things you learn when you're studying nature is that beauty is a product. That's a truth. It's a product of beauty. And so whenever you're drawing, it's beauty that you're looking for. You're looking not a beauty, not the beauty or anything out there. The beauty, the thing that makes compelling what you see. So it's in the interrelationships of things that beauty sits. And the interrelationships of things have to be right for that beauty to sit there. So the truth beauty is the vehicle for truth. And so that's why I'm returning to that and why I thought this was a pretty exciting question. All right, good, Antiguos. Thank you very much for following through. And I appreciate your good spirits. And I should say Alejandro, shouldn't I? If I'm pronouncing that right. All right, we'll see you all next time. This was a short one. Send your questions in and we'll make them longer or shorter or whatever you like. Short questions, short answers, sometimes not. All right, share and subscribe. We're really going up there, the numbers of subscribers. Number of total views and lots of our videos is really strong now, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much for sharing whenever you do. And do comment, okay? All right, next time.